She didn't raise her voice. She didn't threaten. She just stood between the staircase and the old man in the wheelchair and said, quietly, like someone who had already made peace with whatever came next, "Don't touch him again." The woman on the stairs was beautiful in that expensive, deliberate way, the kind of beautiful that required maintenance. Her hand was on the railing. Her eyes weren't frightened. They were measuring. Standing at the bottom of the stairs was Zinnia. Cream-colored uniform, dark braids pulled back, chest rising and falling like she'd just surfaced from deep water. Her right hand was still warm. Behind her, a 78-year-old man named Dr. Franklin Ossie sat in his wheelchair. His left cheek was red. His hearing aid had been knocked sideways. His hands, spotted with age and trembling slightly, gripped the armrests. The door opened. Rowan walked in. Tall, shirt half untucked, car keys still in hand. He saw three things in 2 seconds. His fiancée on the stairs, hand to her face. His home caregiver standing between her and his grandfather. His grandfather's cheek, still coloring. 3 people. 2 seconds. One version of events he was going to have to choose. 5 months earlier, Zinnia Addo arrived in Phoenix with a single duffel bag, a certified nursing assistant license she'd earned at 23, and a voicemail from her mother she'd been saving for 6 weeks, because listening to it again felt too much like goodbye. "You were made for this," her mother had said from the hospital bed in Accra. "Your hands know how to hold people up." Zinnia hadn't known then how literally she'd need to take that. She stood at the service entrance of a house in the Arcadia district, a low, wide mid-century with a pool and a wall of glass facing the mountains. Clean lines, expensive quiet. The kind of house that didn't make noise because it didn't have to. The estate manager, a dry woman named Miss Hollis, walked her through the kitchen without pausing. "Dr. Ossie is 81. Zinnia noted the correction immediately. The posting had said 78. 3 years of difference at that age was significant. Retired cardiovascular surgeon. He was at Emory for 31 years. He's sharp. He reads everything. He'll ask you things. He'll know if you don't know." Zinnia thought about her uncle, who had tested her in a similar way for her entire childhood, and said nothing. The room at the end of the South Hall was full of light and full of objects that had been used. A stethoscope hung on the wall like art. But it wasn't art. A framed surgical diagram. Shelves of medical texts with broken spines and penciled margins. A jazz record propped against the window, sleeve worn soft from handling. In the center of the room in the wheelchair was Dr. Franklin Ossie. Small, fine-boned, white close-cut hair, reading glasses, sitting slightly low on his nose over a copy of the New England Journal of Medicine. He looked up at Zinnia the way doctors look at colleagues they haven't decided about yet. "What do you know about post-operative rehabilitation for spinal cord injuries?" "Enough to know the research changes faster than most protocols do." He tilted his head. "Who told you that?" "Nobody. I read." Something moved on his face. Not approval. The space where approval might land. "You start tomorrow." Zinnia had been lifting men who couldn't stand since she was 11. Her father had Parkinson's. By the time she was 13, she was managing his medications, walking him through exercises, talking him through the days when his hands shook so badly he couldn't button his own shirt. He died when she was 19. She had been in nursing school for 6 months by then. She did not go home for the funeral because he had made her promise not to. "You finish what you started." That was the only reason she'd taken this job. Not the salary, though the salary was real. She understood what it meant to be the person who stays. Within 3 weeks, she and Franklin found a rhythm. Mornings were his worst physically and his best mentally. He wanted to talk before breakfast, while the pain was still low and the mind was still fast. He'd been a surgeon for 31 years, he said, and surgeons talked while they worked. Silence meant something had gone wrong. So they talked. About medicine, mostly. About the cases he still thought about. About what the field had gotten right and what it had stubbornly gotten wrong. Zinnia argued when she disagreed. He seemed to be waiting for that. The physical therapy started in week 2. His therapist came Tuesdays and Thursdays, but Zinnia ran daily mobility sessions she'd designed from the discharge notes, modifying as she went. He'd had a stroke 14 months earlier, moderate right side, and the work was slow. He hated slow. She had expected that. "You're pushing the range of motion past what's indicated," he said one afternoon. "Your range of motion yesterday was better than the week before by about 15%, she said. I'm following what your body's doing, not what the discharge sheet estimated. He said nothing. He did the exercise. The record player started in week 4. She'd asked if she could put on music while she worked. He'd said it depended on the music. She'd put on Coltrane. He'd gone still in a way that had nothing to do with the stroke and said quietly that his late wife had loved that record. They listened to the whole side without speaking. After that, it was part of the routine. Every afternoon, Coltrane or Miles or Monk while Zinnia worked, and Franklin rested. His late wife's name had been Dorothea. She'd been a high school music teacher, 41 years married. She'd died of a brain aneurysm 2 years ago, 3 days before their anniversary. Franklin had kept her reading glasses on the side table in his room. He'd moved the furniture twice since, but the glasses stayed in the same spot. Priya arrived every day around 2 in the afternoon. She ran a luxury interior design firm. 40,000 Instagram followers. She called Franklin her favorite person, her inspiration. She brought flowers. She sat with him for 20 minutes, never longer, and posted photos after. Zinnia watched. Real warmth was imprecise. It ran over at the edges. It forgot itself. Priya's warmth was managed, like lighting in a showroom. Every gesture arrived at the right angle. Zinnia's father used to say, "People who never forget themselves around you usually aren't thinking about you at all." Day 14. Zinnia comes back to the room with afternoon medication. The door is cracked. Priya's voice low. "Rowan's going to be very busy next year. New office, new city. We've already looked at a place in Austin. And you need more structured care than this situation provides. There are wonderful facilities, private rooms, staff who specialize." She paused. "You'd have your records and your music. You just wouldn't have this house." Franklin's voice, "I'm not ready for that. Priya, that's what people say when they're scared. But Rowan worries, and when I tell him what I see, the confusion, the bad days, he listens to me. He always has. Franklin, I'm not confused." "Priya, I know that, sweetheart. But he doesn't, and he trusts me to tell him." Zinnia stood in the hallway, medication in hand, fingers bloodless on the pill case. She walked in, smiled, normal, set the water glass down. Priya barely looked up. Her smile returned without any seam. Zinnia began to watch more carefully. Day 19. While helping Franklin with his morning routine, she saw it. A bruise on the inside of his upper arm, 3 inches wide, yellowish at the edges, newer at the center. "You didn't bump that," she said. "Doorframe," he said, pulling his sleeve down. "You're a cardiovascular surgeon," she said. "You know what a grip mark looks like." He looked at the window. "It's nothing." She didn't push. She photographed the bruise while helping him dress, quietly, efficiently, the way she'd learned to document her father's falls for insurance purposes. The gate had closed again, but she'd seen past it now. Day 23. Zinnia finished her shift and passed the south hall on her way out. Franklin's door was open. The wheelchair was pointed toward the wall. Not the window, not the room, the wall. 3 feet from white paint. He was sitting still. His hands were in his lap. He couldn't maneuver the chair himself. The right side still didn't have full strength. She stopped. How long? She looked at her phone. 4:47. She thought about the last time she'd checked on him before leaving. Just past 11. Almost 6 hours facing a wall because someone had aimed him there and left. She gripped the handles and turned the chair back to the window. The mountains caught the last hour of light. He blinked, slowly, like someone surfacing. "It helps my concentration," he said. He looked at her. She said the window was distracting you. He looked back at the mountains. "She's not wrong that I'm distracted." "By what?" He didn't answer. She reached over and put the medical journal back in his sa. He held it. His hands shook through the first page. By the third, the surgeon's focus had returned. She stood by the window. Her jaw was so tight it ached. Day 27. Dorothea's reading glasses were gone from the side table. Franklin said nothing about them, but he kept reaching toward the spot where they'd been and then stopping, like correcting a step on a staircase that had been moved. Zinnia searched for 2 days. She found them in the back of a linen closet, tucked inside a folded blanket. She cleaned them with her apron. She put them back on the side table where they'd lived for 2 years. Franklin looked at them for a long moment. Then he reached out and picked them up, the way you pick up something you thought you'd lost. "Thank you," he said. 2 words. She heard everything in them. That night she lay in her room in the East Wing and stared at the ceiling for a long time. She didn't cry for herself. She cried for the man down the hall who was still being made to feel like a problem to be solved. Day 31. Zinnia heard it from the corridor, a sharp, short sound. Then silence where a cry should have been. She opened the door. Priya was beside the wheelchair, standing too close, her hands still raised. Franklin's right hand was cradled in his lap, the weak side, the side with the least protection. Priya's expression reset before Zinnia had finished opening the door. He dropped his medication cup. I was just picking it up. The smile was complete and immediate. That night, Zinnia iced the 2 fingers that had swollen, wrapped them gently, listened to the sound of Coltrane still playing softly from the record player. She said what she'd been waiting to say. You need to tell Rowan. She's been telling him for months that I'm deteriorating, Franklin said. She had a doctor here 3 weeks ago. She introduced him as a friend, but she had a form with her. Something about capacity evaluation. You're one of the sharpest people I've ever met. It doesn't matter what I am. It matters what she can make him believe. Silence. She's not smarter than you, Zinnia said. She's just colder. Those aren't the same thing. Day 36. Zinnia went to Rowan, his home office, glass walls, a desk covered in architectural plans. She told him everything, the whispered threats about the facility, the bruise, the hidden glasses, the wheelchair aimed at the wall, the swollen fingers. He listened. He pulled out his phone. He called Priya. Priya arrived and the performance began. Tears. A voice practiced at breaking just short of melodrama. She pulled up photos. She and Franklin laughing at a gallery opening, arm in arm at Rowan's birthday, cheek to cheek in the garden. Why would I do any of that? I love him. He's going to be my grandfather. Why would she say these things? Rowan went to his grandfather's room. Both women followed. Pop. Zinnia says Priya's been hurting you. She says there have been threats. Is that true? Franklin's eyes moved from Rowan's face to the woman behind him. Priya stood just past Rowan's shoulder. Her expression was all concern and love and sadness. But her eyes were saying something else. Capacity evaluation. Memory problems. The facility. You know what happens if you don't say the right thing. Franklin looked down at his hands. Rowan is asking me directly, and I have to be honest with him. Zinnia hasn't been with us long enough to understand how we operate. She misread the situation. Priya has been nothing but kind. Rowan nodded. He looked at Zinnia. He was not unkind about it, but he was clear. My grandfather has spoken. If this happens again, I'll need to make other arrangements. He left. Priya followed. In the doorway, she looked back at Zinnia, not with anger, with nothing, as if Zinnia were furniture that had briefly been in the wrong place. Zinnia stood in the room alone with Franklin. He looked at his hands. I'm sorry, he said. Don't be sorry, be angry. I don't have the energy for angry anymore. Then I'll carry it for both of us for a while. She sat beside the wheelchair. She took his wrapped hand in both of hers, very carefully. Don't leave me alone with her, he said. Not a question, not a request. Just a fact he needed someone else to know. I'm not going anywhere. And she wasn't. The weeks after that were quieter in the wrong way. Zinnia stayed. She cooked and medicated and ran the daily mobility sessions. She argued with Franklin about surgical ethics and Duke Ellington, and whether the designated hitter rule had saved or destroyed baseball. He took the opposing position every time, and was right about 40% of it. Rowan began to notice, not the thing that was happening, but what had changed on the outside. One afternoon he passed the South Hall and heard something. He stopped. Franklin was in the middle of a theory about Miles Davis's decision to go electric in 1969. He was building an argument. His voice was fast and precise and entirely his own. Rowan stood in the doorway for almost 4 minutes and did not interrupt. That evening, in the kitchen, he sounded like himself today. Zinnia looked up from the stove. He sounds like himself most days. He didn't before. He wasn't given many reasons to. What did you do differently? I argued with him. I put on his records. I made him jollof rice on Thursdays. He's not West African. He told me he'd never had it. That seemed like a problem worth solving. Rowan almost smiled. I mean with the therapy, the mobility work. I follow what his body tells me, instead of what a discharge sheet estimated for a different patient. Rowan leaned against the counter. I should be more involved. He was surgeon for 31 years. He shaped how people survived. He's been in that wheelchair for 14 months and you check in like you're verifying he hasn't escaped. Nobody talked to Rowan like that. Not his partners, not his contractors, not his investors. I do more than that. How are you, Pop? Zinnia said. Good. Fine. That's not a conversation. That's a welfare check. He said nothing. She turned back to the stove. He's still that man, she said. He just needs someone to treat him like he is. That evening, Rowan went to his grandfather's room. He stayed for 90 minutes. Priya noticed the shift too. Franklin was louder now, stronger, harder to manage quietly. She tightened her grip. She had Zinnia's hours cut. She switched out the physical therapist without consulting anyone, and replaced him with someone who reported back to her. She began limiting visitors, explaining to family members that Franklin was having difficult periods, that too much stimulation wasn't good for his recovery. Month 5, Tuesday afternoon. Franklin said what he had been building toward for weeks. I'm going to tell my grandson what you are. He sat with me last week for an hour and a half. He heard me. He's starting to see me again. When he sees me clearly, he'll see you clearly. Priya's voice went flat. He sees what I show him. He's smarter than that. He's in love. Same thing for now. The sound came before Franklin had finished his sentence. An open palm against the left side of an old man's face, hard enough to knock the hearing aid sideways. Dorothea's reading glasses spun off the side table and hit the floor. Zinnia opened the door. Frame 1, Priya standing over the wheelchair, hands still in the air, face completely blank. The expression of someone who has finished a task. Frame 2, Franklin, head turned from the impact, left cheek darkening, eyes open and steady and entirely lucid. Frame 3, the glasses on the floor, the things he used to read, to see, to stay himself. Zinnia looked at the glasses. She looked at the mark on his face. She looked at Priya standing there like nothing had happened. Something ignited. Not anger, though anger was in it. Not bravery, though that was in it too. A reflex. The same one that had gotten her out of bed at 3 in the morning when her father had fallen. The same one that had kept her in Phoenix when the job had tried to become something it wasn't supposed to be. The reflex of a woman who had been taught by 15 years of caregiving that the body knows before the mind does what it will and will not allow. 4 steps, her right hand palm open. Not a fist, not a weapon, a correction. Her palm connected with Priya's face, not softly. Priya stumbled sideways, caught herself on the doorframe, and her hand flew to her cheek. The room was suddenly very still. Zinnia turned and stood between the wheelchair and the woman in the doorway. Her hand was shaking. Her visa clock was running. Her job was over. She did not move. Don't touch him again. Behind her, Franklin looked at the back of Zinnia's head with an expression he had not felt on his face in 2 years. The expression of someone watching a stranger step in front of a moving car to get them out of the way. Someone fought for me. 35 seconds. The front door opened. Rowan walked in. Car keys, half untucked shirt, the look of someone who had come home expecting an ordinary evening. He stopped on the stairs. He looked at his fiancée's reddened face, at Zinnia standing completely still, at his grandfather's cheek, at the hearing aid knocked crooked, at Dorothea's glasses on the floor. Priya spoke first. She was fast with the tears, always had been. She hit me, no warning, no reason. I was visiting with your grandfather and she walked in and she hit me. She pressed her hand to her face. Her voice was breaking in exactly the right places. Rowan looked at Zinnia. Zinnia said nothing. Pop. Franklin's eyes moved slowly from Rowan's face to Priya. She was behind Rowan now, her face full of grief and shock and something that looked very much like love. Her eyes, above all of that, said, the facility, the evaluation form, the doctor. You know what I do with people who don't say the right thing. Franklin looked at his hands. He looked at Dorothea's glasses on the floor. He looked at the back of Zinnia's head. She was still standing between the wheelchair and the door. She hadn't moved. She was still shaking slightly and she hadn't moved. Somebody fought for me today. He lifted his head. She slapped me, he said. The room went still. Priya slapped me. Today and before today. She grips my arms hard enough to bruise. She put those glasses on the floor and left me without them for 4 days. She put my chair facing the wall and left me there for most of a day. She told me that if I didn't tell your doctor I was losing my mind, she would do it for me, and she'd make sure you believed her. His voice got steadier as he went. The surgeon coming back. The man who used to call a room full of residents to order. That is not confusion. I want you to hear that clearly. That is a 31-year career in diagnostic medicine and a very good memory. Rowan looked at Priya. He looked at her for a long moment. Then, get out. She shook her head slowly. You're choosing the help over me. I'm choosing my grandfather. Something in his voice he hadn't heard from himself before. I should have done that before now. Priya left. Heels on hardwood, then on tile, then the sound of the front door. Gone. But not finished. At 9 that evening, Priya called the police. A home care worker had assaulted her. That was what she told them. And technically, the law didn't ask why. Zinnia was questioned. Her nursing license was flagged for review. Priya contacted a medical board acquaintance and filed a complaint. By morning, there was a story on a local blog. Assault charge, caregiver, details still emerging. The comments under the story were immediate and unkind. Zinnia read them in the East Wing room at 11 at night. Her hands didn't shake. Her father had been called worse things by the neighbors, who thought a man with Parkinson's was being dramatic. Rowan knocked on her door. I called my attorney an hour ago. Why? Because what you did is not what she's calling it. I hit your fiancée. You hit the woman who's been hurting my grandfather for over a year while I wasn't paying attention. He paused. The house has cameras, every main room. I had them installed after a break-in 2 years ago. They run to a private server. She didn't know. Zinnia looked at him. I've been watching the footage for the past 3 hours. He said, I pulled everything from the last 14 months. He didn't say anything for a moment. Why didn't you look when I told you the first time? He had no answer. The answer was that he hadn't wanted to see, and he had been too comfortable not wanting to. I'm looking now, he said. He watched the rest of it alone. 7.5 hours. His office dark except for the screen. He watched Priya remove Dorothea's glasses from the side table. Deliberate. Wrap them in a linen cloth. Walk to the closet. Push them to the back under a blanket. Walk out. He watched his grandfather reach for that spot on the table for the next 4 days, every time, and stop, and not say anything. He watched her turn the wheelchair toward the wall and leave. He watched his grandfather try to move it with the right hand that still didn't cooperate. Try twice. And then go still. He watched him sit that way for hours while the light in the room changed. He watched Priya stand on his grandfather's fingers. He watched her pull his upper arm hard enough to bruise, twice, on 2 different days, in 2 different conversations, and smile through both. He heard the whispered threats in their full text. He heard the phrase capacity evaluation 5 times across 6 months. He watched his grandfather's face absorb each one, the surgeon compressing. A man being made smaller on purpose, visit by visit, so that a particular version of him would be easier to file away. Then he watched Zinnia, returning the glasses, cleaning them first with her apron, kneeling beside the chair to place them on his grandfather's face, turning the wheelchair back to the window, the light hitting the old man's face, the way he blinked surfacing. Zinnia's daily therapy sessions, the same 3 exercises, repeated differently each time based on what she was seeing. Zinnia sitting beside the wheelchair at 11 at night, not talking, just there. Because Franklin had had a bad hour, and she had stayed past her shift without discussing it with anyone. The 2 of them mid-argument about Miles Davis, both certain they were right. And then the footage from that afternoon. The slap, the glasses spinning, Zinnia crossing the room. He watched it 4 times. On the 4th viewing, he noticed what he'd missed the first 3. After Priya went down, Zinnia's whole body was shaking. Not her hand. Everything. She was terrified. She planted herself between the wheelchair and the door anyway. And she didn't move. Rowan opened his laptop. He pulled up Priya's company financials, the ones he'd never had reason to look at closely. He called his private investigator at 2 a.m. A purchase made 14 months ago, 3 weeks before his grandfather's first fall. The one that had started the whole trajectory toward the wheelchair. A single purchase from a specialized medical supplier. A fall alarm system. The kind designed for someone expected to be unstable. Purchased before the fall that justified it. His PI called back in 6 hours. There was more. A series of emails between Priya and her business partner about a timeline. A timeline that involved Rowan's trust and a proposed amendment to his grandfather's living arrangements. The emails predated the stroke by 4 months. He sat with it for a full day. His grandfather had not had an accident. He'd been managed, incrementally, by someone who understood that the most effective harm is the kind that looks like care. He told Zinnia first. She went completely still. He blames himself for the fall, she said. He told me his balance had been an issue and he should have told his doctors sooner. It wasn't his balance. She looked at the window for a moment. He needs to hear this from you, she said. Not from an attorney, from his grandson. In his room, sitting down, no phone in your hand. They told Franklin together by the window, the Superstition Mountains catching the last hour of afternoon light. He listened the way he had listened to difficult diagnoses for 31 years. Patiently. Precisely. Then he set his medical journal on the side table next to Dorothea's glasses and was quiet for a moment. She timed it, he said. Not a question. The timeline starts 4 months before the stroke. He nodded, slowly. I've been angry at my own body for 14 months. He looked at his hands, the surgeon's hands, one steadier than the other now. I thought I had failed myself. You didn't, Rowan said. Franklin looked at him for a long time. Then the voice came back, the one that had called residents to order for 30 years. I want the full picture made available. All of it. I want her to know that I know, and I want anyone who needs to know, to know. The press conference was Franklin's idea. He insisted on attending. Wheelchair, close-cut white hair, Dorothea's reading glasses on his face, the pair Zinnia had found in the linen closet. She'd found the backup pair the same day, identical frames, and had them ready without being asked. The room was full of cameras and reporters who had come expecting a salacious story about a caregiver assault charge. Rowan spoke first. 3 days ago, a woman in my employ struck my fiancé. It was reported as an unprovoked attack. I'm here to show you what actually happened. The screens came on. 11 minutes of footage. The hidden glasses, the wall, the bruised arm, the fingers, the whispered timeline, the capacity evaluation forms. The gasps started in the second minute and built. The full text of Priya's whispered threats rolled across the screen in subtitles. Then Zinnia, in the daily clips, returning the glasses, running the therapy sessions, turning the wheelchair back to the light. Then the afternoon, the slap, the glasses spinning, Zinnia crossing the room, planting herself. The room erupted. Then Rowan, there's more, the purchase records, the emails, the timeline, the details currently under investigation by both civil and criminal counsel. Franklin rolled to the center of the platform. The room went quiet the way rooms go quiet when someone who was supposed to be silent decides to speak. My name is Dr. Franklin Ossie. I was a cardiovascular surgeon at Emory University Hospital for 31 years. I have had a stroke. I am in a wheelchair. I am not confused and I am not declining. I am an 81-year-old man who was told, repeatedly and systematically, that the best way to disappear quietly was to agree that he was already gone. He looked to the side of the room. Cream-colored uniform. Dark braids pulled back. Eyes very bright. A young woman who had come to Phoenix with a duffel bag and a CNA license and had spent 5 months treating him like he was still the man he had always been. She fought for me when I had stopped fighting for myself, he said. I am speaking today because she reminded me that there was still something worth speaking for. Priya was investigated. Elder abuse. Financial coercion. The emails provided enough to open a fraud investigation. Her firm went offline within 48 hours. The comments under the assault story flipped entirely. The nursing board closed the complaint file the following week. Zinnia's charges were dropped. 3 weeks later. Morning. Franklin's room. Lamp on. Record player going. Window full of light. He was in the wheelchair, glasses on, medical journal open, reading aloud to himself in the half-murmured way he'd developed when he was working through something. Zinnia sat near the window and did the month's documentation. She didn't need to be there for the reading. She was there anyway. You're staying, he said. Not a question. I'm staying. Not exactly as a caregiver. I'm not sure there's a title for it. I argued with you about the designated hitter rule for 2 hours last Thursday. You were wrong. I was making a case. That's different. He almost smiled. You were wrong and you knew it and you kept going. That's called commitment to the argument. It's called stubbornness. Those aren't always different things. He looked at her. You sound like Dorothea. She sounds like she was right about a lot. She was. He reached out and picked up the reading glasses from the side table just to hold them. Stay, he said. I already said yes. I know. I wanted to say it again. Rowan had offered Zinnia a formal arrangement before the press conference. Full salary, full benefits, visa sponsorship. She'd accepted with one condition. I work for your grandfather, not for you, not for the household. For him, that's what this is. He'd said, that's what it always should have been. He'd said it the way someone says something they mean but are still learning to sit with. The evening after the press conference, Zinnia was in the kitchen making jollof rice. It was Thursday. The smell of tomatoes and Scotch bonnets and bay leaf filled the whole south wing. Rowan sat at the kitchen island and watched her work. "You didn't have to stay," he said. "After all of it, the charges, the coverage. You could have walked. I told Franklin I wasn't going anywhere. He told me that. He also told me something else." She glanced over her shoulder. "He said I look at you like you're a problem I'm hoping doesn't get easier." She set the wooden spoon down and looked at him. "He said that. He's observant. He's a former cardiovascular surgeon with nothing but time to watch people. That's true." She picked up the spoon again. He reached across the island, not for her hand, for the spoon, tasted directly from the pot. She stared at him. "You did not just do that." "I'm learning." "You're not learning. You're making things up and calling them learning." "Teach me then." She looked at him for a moment. He looked back, the island between them. The same kitchen where she had told him he treated his grandfather like a welfare check, where he had first heard the sound of an old surgeon in full argument and stopped walking to listen. The distance between now and then felt smaller, not by accident. "Thursday," she said. "What about Thursday? Come sit with him for an hour first, then come here, I'll make extra." "Is that a date?" "It's jollof rice. Don't make it into something." From down the hall, clear and unhurried and completely unapologetic, "I can hear both of you, and yes, it's a date." Zinnia laughed. Rowan didn't look away. The sound of a retired surgeon's voice, filling a house in Phoenix, Arizona, at 7 in the evening on a Thursday, was the sound of a house finally remembering what it was built for. In the morning, the record player was on. The window was open. Franklin was in his chair, glasses on, journal open, reading aloud. The Coltrane was playing from the old turntable in the corner. Zinnia sat nearby and did not pretend she needed a reason to be there. Outside, the Superstition Mountains held their shape against the early light. The same as always, the same as they had been before all of this. Indifferent and enormous and entirely unconcerned with what small, difficult, necessary things people did in the houses at their feet. She had come to Phoenix with a duffel bag and a license, and her mother's voice on a saved voicemail. She had taken a job because she understood what it was, to stay with someone the world was trying to make smaller. She had made jollof rice on Thursdays and argued about baseball, and found a pair of reading glasses in the back of a linen closet, and cleaned them with her apron, and put them back where they belonged. And when she had seen a man's face, struck hard enough to knock his hearing aid sideways, she had crossed the room and done what her body had learned across 15 years of caring for people who couldn't protect themselves. Not to hurt. To stand in the way. Some people wait for permission to do the right thing. Zinnia had stopped waiting a long time ago. She knew what her hands were for.